Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right, Giants are heading for a week 2 matchup with the Washington Commanders, coming off of an extremely disappointing performance in week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. Here to help me break down this week's matchup between NFC East Titans, the Giants, and the Commanders is longtime friend and longtime DC area sports writer Rick Snider. Rick, how you doing? Good to see you.
Well, it's another year here in the nation's capital where we're worried more about people eating cats than the Commanders winning games.
I thought it was dogs. I thought it was
Well, that
dogs.
too. Well, it's a
Yeah.
little bit of both, and what was the other one? Ducks? Yeah, ducks too. So I mean, the nation's capital is a buzz of as we near the presidential election, and it's funny that I remember Bill Clinton one time said that he loved the Redskins quarterbacks because they were the only people in town that could get people focused on them instead of him, and so which is kind of true. It's the two institutions we're both not doing well, and there's a lot of change in Washington. This is the biggest roster change, about 60%. The biggest single roster change since 1945 when the veterans came back from World War II. That's how big a roster change this is. And
Wow.
of course, all the coaching staff and all the front office, they kept the guard by the door. But it's like everyone is gone, and yet when I'm watching the opener and they're getting blown out, I'm like, I feel like I've been asleep for 8 months and I woke up. We're still playing last season because you changed everything and yet it all still sucks. So I don't understand
Well,
how.
well, I think Rick, you and I are in the same boat because the Giants were 6-11 last year. They started 2-8. Daniel Jones, you had a neck injury and then a torn ACL and was utterly miserable in the 6 games he did play. And the Giants started the 2023 season with an embarrassing 40-0 loss to Dallas. And this year, the Giants, it took 3 plays for Daniel Jones to start to get booed in MetLife Stadium. 3 plays, -9 yards. They punted. They were getting booed before the defense even had a chance to get on the field. Daniel Jones was harassed by fans in the parking lot after the game. So
Yeah,
it's like seeing this movie before.
but down here we call him Danny Dimes because he's great down here. I mean, what a weird thing. What is you probably have the stats, but you know, he's like Phil Simms and Eli Manning. He's a Redskin killer down here. We think he's
5-1-1.
yeah.
5-1-1 against Washington in his career. And it's just it's amazing because it's the one team that he has seemed to own throughout his career.
And the weird part is, I always say for Washington, of course, they have the Dallas thing. The rivalry is a little aged, but whatever. The Philly games they play every year are the strangest games that always happen, either who wins or the weirdest play of the year. But the Giants games have become the most agonizing, aggravating games because they've often outplayed the Giants and still lost. The only decades Washington and the Giants used to be a great rivalry. I mean, I used to come up with Sam Huff, during the games up there, and people treated Sam Huff like royalty. And it was such a big rivalry, not so much down here, but the only time they've ever really beaten the Giants, I looked it up. The only decades that they won were the 70s and 80s. And the 80s were the Joe Gibbs era, and they were 11-10 against the Giants. All the other decades lost. So it's I think they're down like 30 some games in the win loss part of it. But it's just been aggravating that they've walked away from the Giants game so many times going, man, could have won that. What happened?
Yeah, I can't figure out the whole Daniel Jones thing, against Washington. It's like could they just play Washington every week? Maybe he'd look like a real quarterback all the time.
Yeah, that's when he signs the big deals, I guess, after Washington games. But,
So
yeah.
so hey, let's talk about all of the newness in Washington. And you talked about the roster changeover. Um And let's back up a little bit. Everything starts with Daniel Snider having been out a year ago, Josh Harris taking over as owner in Washington. Um, it's been long enough now to start to see sort of the Harris effect, Harris impact in Washington. Just talk about the different feel of the franchise now, under different ownership.
I'm sure it feels like a French village after the Germans left, honestly, because it's like the occupation is over. The darkness that surrounded this facility, no matter what, because of the owner, is gone. And people are now happy in some respects, not these losses, but they're actually I didn't realize how much Snyder had quit spending money on this team. Harris has already put in $100 million into a stadium that he hopes to walk away from in 2030. The biggest mistake they made at FedEx is about the Giants. Jack Kent Cook, the old owner, loved the old Giant Stadium, and that's how he built FedEx Field to be like it. He built a stadium based in on the past, not the future, and it aged really quickly. But Josh Harris has bought a lot of duct tape and all that, and the fan experience is, from what we saw this year, they have things like instead of your concession stands, you can just walk in, scan your card, go get stuff out of the coolers like it's 7-Eleven or something, and scan and
Wow.
even getting in the stadium, they have new things where they don't have to do individuals. They have these huge, whatever you call them, octometer or something that crowds can walk through. And so you don't have these huge lines to get in anymore. So
Nice.
we'll have a lot of Giants fans at this game. I mean,
Mhm.
I still think there'll be more Giants fans than Commanders fans in this game, even though it's the home opener. But a lot of people from New York are down here already. So we have to be nice to the Yankees now. Thank you very much. And, I mean, 5% of the city itself is New Yorkers who have relocated. I mean, that's a lot of people. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who moved down here, and so they've lived here a while. They're still Giants fans. So it'll be at least half the Giants fans because the Commanders fans just aren't there yet. They're a little tepid on things. They're not sure that the name's going to stay, so they don't want to buy the gear and they don't want to all that kind of stuff. But
So
Harris has definitely got people looking to the future. Hired a sharp GM in Adam Peters. He was the go-to guy everybody wanted. They got Dan Quinn as a coach, who I don't think was their first choice necessarily, but um, you know, good guy. I like him. He's trying to bring some energy, but the other day he was talking about it's going to take time, and I thought I've covered 11 coaches after Gibbs left, and they all beg for time, and none of them ever won. So
mhm.
this 5-year plan stuff that's for the Russians. Win now. Is my opinion. And they signed like 23 free agents right away. A lot of them on 1-year deals. So we're going to see turnover again. But they got some guys. I like how they got Zach Ertz, who killed them when he played at Philly. He's still got some fire in him. Austin Eckler. They're not coming. They're not like the old guys that came years ago that wanted another paycheck. They got some free agents that are here to do something. And of course,
Mhm.
it'll all revolve around how good the quarterback is.
Right. So let's talk about the quarterback. I don't know if you watched any of the Giants offseason version of Hard Knocks, but
A little.
Brian Daboll, Giants coach Brian Daboll, um, the Giants clearly spent a lot of time in the offseason on quarterbacks. They clearly have an eye toward a post Daniel Jones future in New York, which if he can't play better against Washington may happen sooner rather than later. But they clearly considered moving up in the draft, mostly to number 3. That's the spot where they thought they could get um, Brian Daboll. During Hard Knocks, Joe Shane asked the people around the table, would you trade up to go get Jaden Daniels? And he absolutely said he would do that. He would absolutely be in favor of that. Obviously, that was never going to happen because Washington wasn't letting him get past number 2. So the Giants are still where the Giants are at quarterback. The Commanders have at least hope for the future with Jaden Daniels. Um, Just tell me, what your impression is of Daniels so far, what the impression of him is, from Commanders fans in general.
It's not quite the Robert Griffin hysteria, which was like the old Beatles days when the women were screaming on the tarmac hysterically. Remember the Beatles, and they're just wild. I mean, I don't know what I would do to scream like that personally. I mean, it might be God coming down from heaven, maybe, but
You you and I
nonetheless,
you you and I would get hurt if we tried to do that, Rick.
I mean, that hysteria about it, but that was what it was like with RG3. Here, people are a little less. Well, there's a lot less fandom, to be honest, but they're a little less endorsing him. But I think he's the one. He's going to be their best quarterback since Joe Theismann in '85 when Lawrence Taylor ended that. This guy can do it. He's got a great arm. Okay, I've seen plenty of guys with great arms. He's got really great mobility, which more so than he needs on there. Smart is in the building at 5:30 during training camps, stuff like that. I mean, he's there putting in the work that I haven't always seen with quarterbacks. He's got a pretty good attitude about everything. He's going to need to learn to not run as much because people here are bigger, faster, and heavier. He ran 16 times in the first game. You're like, dude, there are quarterbacks who don't run 16 times their whole careers. You can't do this. You're going to get hurt. You can't slide worth a damn either. So, but he's got everything there. He just needs time. And as long as he stays healthy, just like Robert Griffin didn't have the health factor, he would have been good.
Right.
I
Mhm.
think JD is it. He's good at a quick release, which is great because this offensive line is still really tattered on the ends. Their interior line's not too bad, but the tackles aren't there yet. So he's got a good quick release. He can put it out there quick. He tucks the ball and runs a little bit too much more than look for a receiver. That's where he's got to grow on things. They've got an okay backfield that they're working with. The offensive has changed under Cliff Kingsbury. I was a little disappointed in the play calling this past week, but more because the defense gave up scores in 7 out of 8 drives against Tampa. So you're playing from behind, and that doesn't help on this. But the quarterback can make it all. He can make it all happen. This is why they wouldn't even think about it. They identified him early as the guy they wanted. So the Giants could offer him anything they wanted. They wouldn't have done it. It's
Mhm.
funny how the Giants and Washington always seem to want to look for the same players every year. We've done it before. Like, we both wanted an offensive tackle one year, things like that. And they're always near each other drafting. But Washington traded with Philly for a player, and I was like, wow, they traded Jahan Dotson away to Philly,
Mhm.
and I thought
Yeah.
in the division, but
Yeah.
he had his problems under new ownership here, so or management, I should say. So I just think the offense is going to be fine. It's the defense that's going to kill them this year.
It feels like, from a Giants perspective, this is week 2 of the season. And obviously, things didn't go well for the Giants, didn't go great for the Commanders either. But it feels like, if you want to get Washington at this point, it feels like, with the developing young quarterback, maybe getting them now is better than getting them in week 14 or 15.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I forget the rematch, but it's like in the midseason
Hmm.
part of the schedule. Yeah, now would be the time because this team's at least offensively is going to get better. Defensively, I don't know.
Hmm.
They got to get their pass rush together and their defense secondary together. I feel like this is a must win, probably for either team, but whoever loses this game might be 2-15. This is a must win for both teams just because you got to beat the other teams that are like you. And if they lose this one, if they get beat badly by Danny Dimes, um, the wheels come off again, and it's like trade them all away and reboot. It's a long
But
season.
isn't that really, when you think about it, with new ownership, with a first year head coach, with a brand new quarterback, number 2 overall pick, you said, 60% roster turnover, probably big roster turnover next year again. It feels like 2-15, 3-14, where you can say we're just at the beginning, we're just starting something. It's never fun, it's never acceptable, but that would be a whole lot easier to deal with in Washington than it would be in New York at this point. It kind of feels that way. Would you agree with that?
Well, probably. I mean, people in Washington, I mean, the problem is they've been rebuilding constantly for 30 years. I mean, the last Super Bowl was 91, and they've had five playoff teams barely get in since then. They've not had one
Mhm.
that was really good. Maybe the 99 team was 99 was their best team, I think, and they lost in the playoffs
Mhm.
early. So there, people down here, that the fandom is way down. I mean, if I had to, last year, I think they probably had 10,000 season ticket holders, maybe 15. That's about it. They
Mhm.
won't get it. This year they've gotten, maybe they're up to 20 now, but that's ridiculous. I mean, this used to
Mhm.
be a franchise you couldn't get a ticket. So
Right.
fans know they're going to have a losing year this year. I was thinking maybe they'd win 7 games, and with what I've seen so far, it hasn't been positive. But they've got a couple games they can win early. But if they don't like win the Giants game, they could be looking at 0-6. And it's just this town will just abandon them. Then we'll go look at the presidential race and have some cat burgers.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's such a similar situation for the Giants where Minnesota was or should have been a 50-50 game that they should have had a chance to win at home. This is a 50-50 game. Um, but then it gets harder. At least on paper, it gets harder. Although I don't know if the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson are really all that hard. But
You know,
that's ugly.
one of the strangest things for Washington too is they are now on their fifth kicker this year, and which is insane.
In week two, in week
Well,
two.
what happened is they didn't re-sign Joey Sly, which was a mistake. So they signed a kicker from Carolina, who was supposed to be pretty good. But in June, video surfaced of him sexually harassing allegedly a flight attendant, and this team can't afford sex scandals, so they cut him. And then he brought in two more guys in camp. Neither of them made anything, and they cut them. then they signed Cade York real quick for the opener. He misses 2 field goals. They cut him. So we got the fifth guy on the roster. They got Austin Siebert, who's had a cup of coffee around the league. Losing the kicker they really wanted in June leaves you with few options. You're looking at
Mhm,
spring league. You're looking at spring league guys and all. So their kicker, to me, your quarterback is your number one guy, but number two is really your kicker, because
mhm.
who else is directly involved in points?
Right,
Like that. So
right.
that's going to fight him, because if this guy made his 2 field goals against Tampa, they would have been in the game. You never know
Mhm.
what would happen. Instead, they let Tampa pull away and blow them out. But
Well,
they
it's
they have those problems. Well, it's games down here, so we don't have your wind. Are they still doing shifting winds in the new Giants stadium like the old one?
oh yeah, oh yeah. They're still there, but it's so funny because Thomas McGahee, who got fired at the end of last season as Giants special teams coordinator, was talking last year about the kicker train. He said you'd never, because the Giants had Graham Gano, and
Hmm.
he said you never want to be on that kicker train. And because you just never know where it's going to take you. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, Graham Gano was on IR, and the Giants went through. They used their punter to kick a field goal. They used 4 or 5 guys. I want to say York was even on their practice squad for a while last year. And when Randy Bullock got hurt, York was supposed to come up and kick for the Giants, and then he got hurt,
Hmm.
so never got a chance. But yeah, you don't want to be on that kicker train. It's just God only knows what's going to happen. Quickly, when you look at Sunday, how do you see? God only knows, because neither one of these teams is great at this point. They don't have a whole lot to hang their hats on. Um, how do you see this one unfolding? I mean, I'm not necessarily asking you for a prediction, but what do you think we're going to see?
Well, I'd like to think Washington will win, but I think it's a close game. Could be a field goal. It's who doesn't screw it up. That's really what it is. Washington. One coach once told me, "You say, hey, Coach, how do you react to these things?" He goes, "I don't worry about them. I worry about us. If we can do what we do, we're going to win." Well, in that
Hmm.
theory, then Washington's defensive line, which harassed Mayfield all the time but let him escape, They've got to get some sacks. They've got to hit Danny Dimes on that because their secondary is naked and afraid. It just isn't there. They can't man cover. So they've got to get more pressure on the quarterback. And offensively, Jane Daniels has to be able to find his receivers more. Terry McLaurin had one catch. You can't let that happen. So if they can do what they do best, they'll score some points and they can win a game in the 20s. But if you blow it, then it goes bad quick.
Yeah. Feel the largely feel the same way when it comes to the Giants. If they're 0-2, then it's going to get really ugly really fast, or uglier than it already is, because it's already pretty ugly. So we'll see. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Who knows, Rick? One of us. Well, we both might be covering bad football teams again, but
yeah, it's a lot of fun. I covered Super Bowl teams; they were a lot of fun. Covering
I
bad
haven't.
teams, whew.
I haven't. I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, and looking at where the Giants are right now, that's probably not ever going to happen for me because I don't have that many years left to do this. So,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Washington lost their last 8 games last season, so it's been a long time since they've won a game. I think October or something last year. So
wow.
it just that first game was pretty disillusioning to everybody. It's like, wow, same old thing, despite all this change and all this,
Hmm.
what we call the Ashburn syndrome, which is they've
Hmm.
trained in Ashburn, Virginia. So
Hmm.
you think you look good on the plains of Ashburn, and then you get crushed on there. And Tampa's a
Yeah.
tough place to play, especially in
Hmm.
September. That heat, Tampa's heat is a special room in hell. It's really
Hmm.
unbelievable, much
Hmm.
more than a lot of other places. So it's supposed to be a beautiful day on that
All
at
right.
least. So all the Giants fans, come on down, bring your money. You can pay train,
Bring your
take,
money.
bring your
Take.
money, buy your beers. I mean, they don't take cash at this stadium anymore. You have to pay by credit card. And
Yeah.
and I know
Actually.
the reason is so if you bring cash, when you run out of cash, you stop drinking beer. But now you just use your credit card, and at the end of the month, you go, "Good Lord, how much beer did I drink in the game?"
I actually went to a concert a week or so ago, and hadn't been to a big concert in quite a while, and went to buy a drink, and it's like I ran into that not taking cash thing again, and I was like, oh geez, things have changed a little bit. I don't get out enough.
Yeah. Well, next week I'm in Las Vegas on vacation during the season, but I'm not missing a game. But I'm going to be there seeing the Eagles in the Sphere. So
Wow.
I have my own YouTube channel. You can come watch there.
There you go. All right. Hey, Rick, I always enjoy catching up with you. Appreciate the time. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.